What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're gonna do a little science experiment. Obviously, I'm no scientist, but I just picked up this fancy little microscope and I figured why not put it to use on something that I use every day, needle cartridges. So we're gonna be going through 10 different needle cartridge brands. Some are more well-known, respected in the industry, and more expensive, and some you may have never even heard of, on the more affordable side. And as I said before, and I'll probably say 1,000 more times, I am no scientist. This is not an actual scientific study, but I'm personally going to be looking for cleanliness of the needle, if there's any discrepancies like scratches or divots, and the consistency in each needle tip. Seeing if the ends of the needles are exactly the same throughout the entire cartridge. And more importantly, are we actually getting what we pay for? Let's find out. What's up, guys? Big news, I've finally got some merch. I've got this design and many others on a bunch of cool items. We've got hoodies, we've got bomber jackets, we've got socks, you name it, I've got it. And what's even cooler is I got my friend Sabrina's help, who is actually a director over at Disney Animation. That's why they look so dope. I'm super lucky to have her help, and I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. So use the link below and go stock up on a bunch of cool shit. Thanks again, Sabrina, for all the help, and thank you guys for all the support. Once again, welcome back. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so now, as we've got so much cool tattoo content on this channel. But let's get right into looking at these needles. We're gonna start with the cheapest and work our way up to the most expensive. Up first, we've got peach cartridges, and they go for about $21.99 per box of 20. And we're looking at the 9-curve bug pin. Let's have a peek, shall we? So looking up close to this peach cartridge, I immediately see a few little divots that kind of worry me. And this one right here is pretty close to the tip of the needle, which would be injected into the skin. There's a few more small divots here and there. Nothing that really worries me that much, but the more divots and inconsistencies we have, it's just more traumatic to the skin. And this is why I wanted to do this experiment anyway. Now, some companies will have textured needles, but obviously this is not an intentional texture. The rest of the needles are not so bad. Let's check out one more to be safe. This cartridge has a few more divots as well, not very surprising. But what I do see is this little hanger of what looks like to be a hair or something like that near the tip. Now, this isn't necessarily a controlled environment, but I did just open up this needle, so I'm kind of surprised to see anything extra. There's another bigger divot right there. It just looks like these needles got a little scratched up. Looking at the tips of the needles go, they're fairly consistent, but this top needle here does look a bit thicker than this needle down here. So as far as consistency goes, it's relatively okay. And especially for the price, this is kind of what I expect. You really can't beat it. Up next, we have FYT going for $25 a box, and this is a 15-curve mag. Looking at this first picture up close, I mean, it's nothing that we haven't seen yet. It does look like the tips of these needles are supposed to be textured, but I can't really tell if those are textures or scratches. They're not the smoothest needle I've seen so far. As the needle bar goes up, they stay pretty consistent as far as scratches or textures go. There's no little hangers or anything like that that sticks out. There's no divots that I can see, but let's check out another photo. To me, this looks about the same. There is one little divot that I see right there. And looking at the tips of these needles, they do look pretty consistent. They look nice and sharp, and they're all about the same size. So being on the cheaper side, again, I'm pretty impressed with what I'm seeing so far. Up next, we have Electrum, which come in at $25.45. Only 45 more cents. This is a 13-curve mag bug pin, and Electrum and FYT do have a very similar housing, which makes me wonder if they're made in the same factory. But looking at these up close, you can tell that the tips of these needles are textured because the texture kind of dissipates as the needle goes up. However, if we go up near the cartridge housing, that's where those textures or scratches or divots start to come back. But let's compare it to another one of Electrum's cartridges. And this is about the same, which I guess the consistency there is pretty good. I do see a few little things near the tip of these needle pins that kind of stick out, especially right there. But overall, not too bad, especially when it comes to the consistency of the tips of these needle pins. They all look to be relatively the same size. So far, the two photos of these Electrum cartridges are very similar. I'm not saying they're the best cartridges out there, but at least you know what you're gonna get. Up next, we have the Matrix Genesis cartridge, which comes in at $28 a box, and we are looking at a 9-curve mag. Up close, I really like these needles. There are very similar scratches in the needle pins, as we saw on every other photo so far, but there's not really any divots that stand out to me. And as far as the sharpness of the needle goes, these things have to be the sharpest, which to me make for a better tattoo. And they're probably a lot less traumatic to the skin. I can't really see anything that stands out to me on this photo, so let's check out one more. All right, looking at this photo, I think this one's even better than the first one. Up near the cartridge housing, there's a couple small little divots, but it's nothing that would worry me. As far as the rest of the needles as a whole, these look really clean. All the needle tips have a very consistent size, and again, super sharp. So far, these might be my favorite. Up next, we've got Blackwork Supply, which come in at $35.95, and this is a 13-curve mag bug pin. Up close, these needles look pretty clean as well. With this first photo, don't really see any divots or heavy scratches. The needle tips aren't really that blunt, and they're not super sharp. They're somewhere right in between. I don't see any heavy textures near the needle tip, which personally I like. As far as consistency and size in the needle tip, some are slightly bigger than others, especially this one down here seems to be a bit on the chubby side, but overall not too bad. Let's check out one more photo. All right, with this one, I do see a few more scratches. Again, nothing huge, nothing that really stands out at me. And the consistency in these needles, it matches with that last photo we saw. Some are a bit thicker than others, like this thin one near the top is just slightly smaller than this one here. But overall, when it comes to Blackwork Supply needles, these are pretty solid. All right, real quick, I want to take a break and give a shout out to the sponsor of our channel, Mad Rabbit. Mad Rabbit is a tattoo aftercare company that has something for everyone. Whether you're a new tattooer or a longtime veteran, they've got you covered. So head on over to madrabbit.com and check out all they have to offer. And be sure to use code PONY20 to save 20% off your entire order. All right, let's get back to it. Up next, we've got Bishop coming in at $33.99, and this is a 13 curve bug pin. All right, this first photo looks stupid clean. I really don't see anything, not really many scratches at all. The consistency in needle thickness looks to be pretty spot on across the board. Now this is kind of what you'd expect for one of the leading brands, but you know we can't just leave it at one photo, so let's check out one more. Again, this thing is pretty clean. With this photo in particular though, I do see a few questionable things, like this little spot down here. It looks to have a small divot and some sort of little hanger. Again, I know I'm not in a clean room. This could have been something out of the air, but I did just open this needle, so I'm just unsure. But these definitely have to be some of the more cleaner needles I've seen so far. And as far as the needle sharpness goes, these are pretty solid. Next up, we've got Helios needles coming in at $34.50, and this is an 11 curve bug pin. Now with this first photo, I can definitely see some discrepancies right away. No real heavy divots, but if we look close at the needle tips, if we zoom in here, they're just a little scratchy. And again, I know some needles are supposed to be textured. I'm just not certain that that's what this is. But let's check out another photo, shall we? This photo is pretty similar. A lot of the same small discrepancies, nothing crazy. The thickness in needles, when we look at the tips, are slightly varied. Like this tip right here is a bit thinner than this one. This one's kind of a chunky boy. And again, we are looking at these things super magnified, so they might look like a big difference here, but in reality, it's barely anything at all. Moving on to Kwadron, coming in at $37.49 per box. And this is a 9 curve bug pin. When we get up close, not terrible, but the needles are definitely scratchy or textured in some sort of way, especially up near the cartridge housing. I'm kind of surprised since these are one of the more popular needles. I would just expect them to be a bit cleaner. The consistency and thickness seems to be pretty spot on though, so I can't complain there. The next photo seems to show pretty much the same thing. There are a couple spots that I like to point out, like right here and right here. I'm just not sure if it's the photo or the lighting, but it definitely seems to be some sort of divot. And again, personally, I'm looking for more of a clean looking needle. I'm not the biggest fan of textures, but different strokes for different folks. On to the next, which is Black Claw coming in at $39 a box, so definitely on the pricier side. And this is a 9 curve bug pin. I'm very surprised at seeing this thing up close because this whole entire needle is just textured the fuck out. We did go to the website and it didn't say anything about textured needles, so I do question that. And I'm also pretty pissed that these cartridges aren't pink, like the website shows. I know that's not that big of a deal, but if I look at pink cartridges online, I expect them to be pink. But when we look up close, I do see a little bit of a hair or something right there. Not exactly sure what that is. And when we look up close at the needle tips, some of them don't seem to be as sharp as the others. These two right here in particular seem to almost have a bent tip, which is never good. Now to me personally, I don't really understand the appeal of textured needles. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Even if it is part of their design or another cartridge company's design, I just can't wrap my head around how it wouldn't tear up the skin more than a polished, clean looking needle. I do believe that some companies say that textured needles hold more ink, but I've never had an issue with that. Again, this is only one picture, so let's check out another just to give them a fair shake. So there is no little hair or hanger on this one. That could have came from anywhere. But again, that heavy texture is still present. Obviously, it's purposeful for them. Looking at the tips of the needles, some do seem a little thinner than others, and this one I still question if that's just the photo or if it really has that weird barb. I do think these needle pins look exactly the same, but I feel like you could hide almost anything with that kind of texture. I do know loads of artists that use these needles and they swear by them, and they do fantastic work. It's just for me, personally, it's not really what I'm looking for. Let's check out the last needle, which is the TatSoul Envy Gen 2. Coming in at $40 a box. And this is a 9 curve bug pin. Looking up close at this photo, I do see a lot of similar scratches or textures that I have seen with other cartridges. So I am a little surprised since these are the most expensive out of the bunch. They do have a rather blunt tip. These might be the most blunt tips I've seen so far. As far as cleanliness goes, I don't really see any heavy divots or any little hairs or hangers anywhere, so that's a plus. But let's check out one more photo. All right, looking at this one up close, I do see a lot of divots and heavy scratches, which again, I'm kind of surprised because the last photo didn't really have any, but this one, when we look up close, they are obviously there. We've got a nice big gouge right there, a couple little smaller boys right there, some more scratches up top right there. And again, these needles are just as blunt as the last ones, so at least it's consistent in that department. Although I will say that I'm more for a sharper tip, I just think it's less traumatic to the skin, so I can't hate on them for that. As a smooth, polished needle, I am pretty surprised to see this many divots that big for being the most expensive out of the bunch. So what did we learn today, kids? I don't really know. One would assume that if you're paying more for cartridges, that quality control would be higher on the list. Looking back on this video, it seems like some of the cheaper needles really outshined some of the more expensive ones. Obviously, Black Claw had the biggest difference when it comes to texture, but that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. They could have done the research and found out that that's what works best. For them anyway. And as I said before, personally, I go for smooth, polished needles that aren't really going to pull on the skin as they go in and out. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I just thought this would be a really fun way to look up close at the tools that we use every day. I definitely would like to use this machine more. I want to find out how these needles hold up over time, whether that be on fake skin or hitting the bottom of your ink cap. I know you've all done it at least once. It's the noise we all hear in the shop, but nobody wants to say anything. But what do you guys think of these results? Did you see anything on the needles that I missed? Let me know in the comments. Are there any companies that you'd like to see us test? Again, let me know in the comments. Until then, don't forget to subscribe while you're here, and I will see you guys next week.